Silicon Valley. One of the things, actually, all the people who are going to speak over the next 6 weeks, we all had lunch together a couple weeks ago, and we were talking with some Duke people, and what we is that we really want to engage with Duke students a lot closer, because entrepreneurship is, as much as any industry, and possibly more, it's an apprenticeship style industry. And so if you want to do startups, you need to be hanging out with entrepreneurs. So I think the next 6 speakers were all San Francisco based, and we'd love to see more of you out here. But in the meantime, I'm glad that we get to come into your classroom. So I rant a lot on MBAs. My blog is Humbled MBA, and I got my MBA from Dartmouth, which I absolutely love the experience. But there were a lot of things I didn't learn that I really wish I had, and I want to just tell you kind of a few stories along the way, and be as helpful as I can to you in supplementing your curriculum. I'm now best known for doing a company called FlightCaster, which was acquired by NextJump last December. Getting acquired is a sweet, sweet thing. It was 10 years of startup process in the making, and before we get to kind of FlightCaster, I thought we'd back up a little bit, back to when I was at Duke. I looked very similar to how I look today. That is one damn good-looking kid there. I started freshman orientation at Trinity College. The day before classes start, I was pissed off at Ed and Steve because they wanted to sell me a loft. Now, you guys are all Fuqua students. You guys don't do lofts, but undergraduates build those like 6-foot lofts that they put in their rooms to like raise their beds, right? And I was determined that I did not have to pay $200 to some dudes who were going to make it for me. So I went to Home Depot, and I bought a bunch of wood, and I made maybe the ugliest loft you've ever seen, and I made my roommate sleep on it. And I don't know, something like did not click for me super well with classes. Probably because I was like signed up to be pre-med, and I was going to get like an economics and political science double major, and I had like everything really well planned out. I'm really, really bad at biology. I'm pretty bad at economics, and I don't like doing homework. All of those things were a problem. But I do really like making things. And what Student Lofts was really about was making things. And my parents were very concerned that like a week into college, I was borrowing my roommate's car and going to Home Depot to buy wood, because all of a sudden like making these lofts and selling them for $150 was the most important thing in my life. But it was really, really fun to make something. And each year I made like a few more. I made 10 one year, I made 20 another year. And then I got ambitious as well as I needed money. And the next summer, I sent a flyer home in that freshman mailer. And I told all the incoming parents of freshmen that if they don't order their loft now, they might not get one. And so they all emailed me and ordered them. It was phenomenal. And then there I was in my like senior year of college internship, and I was spending most of the day actually working on this little loft company I had. I built a website, I took orders, and when I got back to campus, I hired 10 temp workers from Durham, and they are outstanding people. And we built, in the Wanamaker parking lots, we built 160 lofts over the course of a week. And like Duke facilities came by, and they were like, they told us to leave, and I pointed, there were like, like tons of wood on pallets. I was like, what? I don't understand how you expect me to leave, but I promise we'll be out of here in a week. And then we went and we took all these lofts, and we chained them to the freshman dorms, like around the lampposts. And so when the freshmen got there, we said, your loft is already outside your front door, and you can just take it. And then I like sent my friends around, and they would like accept checks, and the freshmen would move it for us. And Duke facilities got livid with us again. Like, here we have massive piles of wood stacked next to buildings chained. But I told them, like, I'll get rid of them right away, and we did. Like 6 hours later, they were all sold. And then Ed and Steve came back onto campus, and they were shocked to see that like half the loft market had already been pre-sold, and that was their little introduction to competition in their market. What I really love about student lofts is like I was never a handy person. Like I never really stepped foot inside of a Home Depot. And I like didn't grow up like making things with saws, and it's really fun to do. I didn't come up with any innovation on the design. I pretty much took theirs. I like tried to make my own, and it was really, really bad. And in fact, one time, like 3 days into the process, when we had like 90 lofts made, I had like put together this like batch processing so that we could be more efficient, and we lined up all the wood together, and the holes didn't line up. So we had to take apart 80 lofts and start over. That was a really, really bad day. I have this like vivid memory of like 5 a.m. like waking up and just like ready to vomit with stress. I remember like throughout the day, like my arms would hurt from stress. Like I had a lot riding on this. I had maxed out 14 credit cards and like written the courtesy check, and all those credit cards were going to be due in 3 weeks. And I'd used it to buy $20,000 worth of wood. And other than that $20,000, the like cash I had to my name was like $400. And here I was like out in like 90-degree North Carolina heat. I was working with 10 workers from Durham. We had just screwed up the alignment of our holes, and it was so stressful. I don't think like since then I've ever been that stressed. But in the end, the whole thing worked out. And I think Student Lofts was one of like the best companies I've ever built. But two, it was like the first time that without like any instruction about entrepreneurship, I understand the only thing that really matters in entrepreneurship, and that is this axiom of you make something people want. And I'll get back to that when we talk about Y Combinator. But in Y Combinator, we get a shirt on the first day that says make something people want on it. And if you sell your company, you get another shirt that says I made something people want. And that's it. And like all this like learnings of entrepreneurship, if you do that thing right, everything else comes together. And if you don't do that thing right, none of it matters. And in Student Lofts, I had like validation that customers want my product because they paid me money. And in the course of doing some other businesses, as I'll talk about, I lost track of that little axiom. In Student Lofts, I got it all right. The biggest thing I didn't get right with Student Lofts was I didn't have a co-founder. And I like had people that helped, but I didn't have people who made decisions with me. And I think a lot of that stress was because it was all on me. And I'm a pretty manic depressive person, like not clinically, but I have good days and bad days. And I get really, really excited about things, and then I get really down on myself when things aren't working. And I find that almost all my entrepreneur friends have that same sort of attitude. Co-founders are phenomenal if and only if they operate on a different cycle. And by not having a co-founder, I didn't have someone who was feeling positive on the days that I was feeling negative. So when I look back at that company, it just would have been more fun if I was doing it with someone. And I think you find that with early stage investors, they always want to talk about team. And what Paul Graham's gotten really good at Y Combinator is ascertaining whether people have fun together. Because when you have fun with your co-founders, then you don't quit on each other. And if your co-founders are a business relationship where you're just there to like make money together, then when things get really tough, people leave and they like listen to their opportunity cost and go do something else. The other thing I found with Student Lofts that was an issue for me is there wasn't a way for it to move forward. So I sold it to like some other enterprising, scrappy students. But I started to realize that like it was a treadmill for making cash. Like I liked it a whole lot better than I liked having a job. but it just made money. Like there was no value to it. I was just making these wood lofts, and I was like a little bit scrappier than Ed and Steve were, and they were like, I actually admired them more than what I was doing. They were living this like Thoreauvian lifestyle where they would talk to trees and live within nature, and then 2 months every year they'd make lofts for a bunch of college students, and that would fund their like loving nature experience the rest of their life. I made a bunch of money so that I could afford to go buy more beer and have parties with Duke. Fast forward a little bit, I like left Duke super, super aimless. Like entrepreneurship wasn't a thing that I thought I was going to do. I had never taken a computer science course. I didn't have any technical knowledge. I like really knew my way around a Home Depot, but I never once, not a single time, thought I would do startups like it was a thing that could be done. In fact, I hated economics so much that I refused to get the last class in my major, and instead took like Shakespeare and poetry and every American literature course and yoga and golf and massage therapy. It's awesome. And I was like adamant that I would never go to business school either. I just felt like there had to be something more. And I went back and I had the exact same job that I had before Duke, which was working at a summer camp. And I didn't leave for 4 years. And it was just a period where I just wanted to like be with kids and like, I don't know, figure out what I wanted to do when I grow up. And at some point I decided it was time to grow up, and I went to Dartmouth for business school. And I got there, and like 2 months in, I immediately realized that everyone else thought differently than I did. And there's this phenomenal book I read during that time called Is It Better to Be Lucky or Smart? And it's by Bo Peabody. And he's got this, theory on that the people that get lucky were smart enough to realize it, and I believe that's totally true. The thing that he really separated out that spoke to me is he said most of the entrepreneurs are B- students, and that's not because it like takes less intelligence. He says it's because entrepreneurs are really efficient people, and if you can get 80% of the value of an academic experience with 20% of the effort, then why would you keep working? You like move on to something else, and 80% is a B-. And that was me my whole life. Like I could get A's by like being smart, but I never got A's by working hard. And that was a problem for me when I got to business school, because everyone there is both smart and works hard, and I was not as smart and didn't work as hard. And I really didn't connect with things like finance or accounting. I don't know why. You guys are mostly first years, right? I could not figure out which side debit goes on and which side credit goes on until like 2 months in. It was amazing. And I would like put up my left and my right because I had to remember which hand was left, and then try to remember if that was debit or credit and what that meant. So there it was, same thing happened that happened at Duke. I was like, well, I'm kind of bored in this class because I don't understand anything that's going on. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a way for us to like all vote on a whole bunch of things that our classmates thought, especially like whether they were pissed off at their professor. But I didn't want it to just be like ratemyprofessor.com, which at that point was a very small site. I wanted it to be like a whole engagement of discussion about what people thought. So that was the humble beginning of this company called OpenVote. And OpenVote was the platform for polling your friends about things. And back in the Web 2.0 hype fest, anything that was Web 2.0 was cool. But I didn't start it thinking I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I started the same way I started doing lofts, where I really wanted to make this thing because I thought it was a really good idea, and I thought that I could figure it out. And I didn't have any technical ability at all. In fact, I was like a real laggard when it came to computers overall. Like I never used a Mac. I'd never done any programming. I didn't know any HTML. I didn't even use Facebook because I don't know. I just wasn't up on like what was new. And then I sat there and I tried to start a company from scratch while in business school. And I think that best thing I ever did in business school is I decided I was going to spend $15,000 on this experiment in my life. And I look back, if I hadn't have done that, like, I think I would have been interested in entrepreneurship, but not an actual entrepreneur. I call them wantrepreneurs. Because when I decided I was going to spend $15,000 on this, everything got real. Like, one, I had to figure out how I was going to spend the money. And two, I took such a huge risk. I come from 4 years of nonprofits. I had less money than anyone else in business school. But I just decided, like, this had to happen. Otherwise, this thing would never get made. And when you're hiring coders and working on site design and it's your money, it matters a whole lot. So we hired this, like, 42-year-old guy that we found off Craigslist, and he was going to do it as a side project. And I found these, like, 2 kids off Craigslist who were going to be his interns. And, like, 3 weeks in, I realized the 2 kids who are, like, 19 years old and moving boxes for FedEx during the summer, that they were, like, far, far better than the 42-year-old dude. So I went to the 19-year-olds and I said, why don't you be co-founders with me? And you can, like, lead the whole tech effort. And they're like, okay. And I talked to the 42-year-old dude, and he's like, what the hell are you doing? You guys are going to fail. And I said, yeah, probably, but see what happens. So learning how to build OpenVote was really, really cool. And whenever I talk to entrepreneurs now that have, like, an idea for a site, or I've got this idea for an iPhone app, I know it's totally irrelevant unless they built a minimum viable product. Because the whole experience that matters is the building part. It's not the idea part. What we did with OpenVote was, like, 19 different versions of my original idea. And the process of learning how to build software in a startup way was entirely the education of it. I wish it had been successful. It was not. It was, like, horribly, horribly unsuccessful. I did it for 2 years. I gave up every business school vacation that everyone goes on, like the phenomenal winter breaks and spring breaks and consulting abroad, which is like partying in Shanghai. When everyone else was, like, getting signing bonuses, I was, like, staying up late on this little dinky site. Facebook opened up their application platform during it, and I had to like, scrap my whole website and come up with a Facebook app. It was really, really hard. It was really stressful. And I don't think during all of that process it was actually that much fun. And I think the biggest reason it wasn't that much fun is because I wasn't around a community of people who are also doing it. And I think that's one of the biggest risks in business school is you're around people who have really, really awesome opportunities in their life career-wise, and signing bonuses and drinks with Bain at some, like, really hot bar, and, like, weekend retreats to Martha's Vineyard. Like, you're competing with all of that. And what I had to show was I had this little site that didn't work, that we had no users and no revenue. And that was really tough. A lot of self-doubt during that time on whether I should actually be doing this. And there weren't many other Tuck students who were doing it. So I wasn't, like, around people who actually built stuff. But I was around lots of people who like to talk about entrepreneurship and like to talk about technology. And the people who like to talk about entrepreneurship generally, like, did a company 10 years ago and made $1 gazillion, and now they advise and teach. And the people who like to talk about technology worked for, like, Microsoft or IBM or something. And it was during this time that I learned a very important axiom, and that is, get good advice, avoid bad advice. That is your job as an entrepreneur, is to know the difference. And it's so hard. Pretty much everything someone told me who was an entrepreneur more than 10 years ago was, like, almost 180 degrees wrong. And I should just not have ever listened to them. Because they told me things that were true from their perspective in their day. So I, like, did all this work doing a business plan, never knowing that web investors, like, the vast majority of them, like 95%, 99% of the good ones, don't like business plans anymore. So why did I do that whole freaking business plan? And my friends from like IBM and Microsoft, they like showed me how to like spec out documentation in order to hand to coders. Even though 99% of web software right now is built through agile development without documentation, but I didn't know that. So I like halfway through OpenVote, I figured out that I was getting bad advice, and I needed to figure out some way to figure out what the good stuff was. And the best trick I used is the best advice comes from people who are 6 to 18 months ahead of you, and you should try to ignore all other advice. And that has generally served me really well. So I found out that in my business school classes, I had a professor that I absolutely adored, and I would go to him for like life mentorship advice and for kind of general entrepreneurship insight. But I tried to not learn anything else from the school system, and we had lots of arguments about that, but that was okay. And I started on like an aggressive self-education course. So I've got a list of some sites that I think are good advice, and I would be shocked to find an entrepreneur in the web space be successful and not have like read most of this. Almost everyone I meet has like plowed through all these sites. So just quick raise of hands. How many of you guys are like registered on Hacker News? News.ycombinator.com. Okay, one of you's registered. How long have you been registered? And how many of you visit news.ycombinator.com? Okay. You who said you registered, you were pretty slow to raise your hand. Did you? Do you go on? Why did you go on? Yeah. Why did you do it? Awesome. So she just basically heard some advice that this is a good place to get advice, and it's really, really true. If you're an entrepreneur, you should be on news.ycombinator.com every single day, because they're just telling you how to be successful in like the most efficient way, and it's all real-time advice. So, I mean, it's like Reddit or Dig. It's like a ranking of interesting articles. It's mostly relevant to hackers, and if you're non-technical, some of the stuff you won't be able to understand, but you should learn to understand that stuff anyway, because it's really going to help you. Paul Graham, he's the head of Y Combinator. He was originally famous for writing some essays, and if you go to paulgraham.com/essays, it's kind of like the frequently asked questions site of entrepreneurship. And I've read them like 3 or 4 times. I go back to certain ones when I start doing stupid things to figure out why I'm being stupid, and he's generally pretty good at telling me. Venture hacks is like the single best way to learn about raising venture capital right now. You have to be real-time relevant. If you don't have people guiding you that have raised venture in the last year, then you don't know what the current form of raising is. You're playing the wrong game. 37 Signals, in addition to creating Basecamp and like bringing Ruby on Rails into popularity, they wrote a book called Getting Real. I think it's the first book that any MBA should read if they're thinking about building a web product. How many of you have read Getting Real? Anyone? How many of you have heard of it? Okay, so seriously, go read it like today. It's like half an hour. It will explain what agile development actually is, and it's like written for MBAs, and it tells you to stop doing stupid things like designing minimum products that are way too big and just build stuff that you can build really, really fast. We all follow it like it's the Bible. The other Bible right now is Steve Blank, who writes about customer development. How many of you have read anything by Steve Blank? So Steve Blank, he's at Stanford and Haas, and he has done some studies on why startups fail. And 95% of the time, the engineers completed their spec, and the company failed in spite of it. And what he's really discovered is that products fail because you didn't make something that people want. And so what can you as a business person do to build less stuff and still validate your hypotheses? It's a phenomenal methodology. And I think it's the thing that MBAs should be doing. How many of you were going to start a company again? Raise your hand. Or have an idea? And how many of you have already built a minimum viable product that real people that don't know you use? Cool. So half of you. For the other half, you should build something that real people who don't care about you use like as fast as possible. And there should be nothing that stands in your way of doing that, not like lack of a technical co-founder or anything. There are lots and lots of ways to figure out how to build something scrappy that real people use. So I think when OpenVote failed, I realized that if I was going to do another startup, which I really passionately wanted to do at this point, I needed to do it in a way where I would get better guidance, and that's what led me to Y Combinator. I had a few friends that had done it. It's like outsourcing company culture to Paul Graham, because everyone's company becomes like the way he wants it to be, and he's really, really good at it. And my company culture in OpenVote was fine, like we had fun together, but we were always doing the wrong things, and we never knew what was right. And in Y Combinator, you get the whole spectrum from like some of the most incredible speakers in the world, like Mark Zuckerberg or Mark Pincus or Reid Hoffman or Ron Conway. And you get a whole bunch of super smart, successful people who are 6 to 18 months ahead of you. And that's a really good level of cultural guidance where if you simply do what everyone else is doing, your likelihood of success is really, really high. And the problem in my MBA program is that most of the people who wanted to do startups during their MBA also had consulting offers and were going to go take those jobs. And so that doesn't jive well. But when you surround yourself by a group of people who've already made the 2-foot leap into entrepreneurship, then if you simply do like they do, you do better. So we created this concept called FlightCaster. And FlightCaster was a way to predict flight delays 6 hours before the airlines actually post them. How many of you have used FlightCaster before? Wow, painful. How many of you have heard of FlightCaster other than this dude who's going to talk did FlightCaster? All right, a couple of people. FlightCaster was the brainchild of one of my closest friends from business school who used to be a Bain consultant, and he knew like lots of little tricks to like figure out how flights relate, like whether your incoming plane had arrived and going to that gate and looking and checking the FAA. And I talked to him. I still had our whole team from OpenVote, and I said, we still want to do another company. Let's do this as a company, and we'll like make a real product. It was really cool. It was a really fun startup. And one of the things that Paul Graham provided for us was understanding of the process of what a startup is. So we have this whiteboard at Y Combinator that has this thing, the process, written on it at all times, and it's like 100% of startups go through this almost the same way. And if you don't know that this is the process, you can be kind of shocked when you hit certain down moments. So before you launch, you're in a phase called Delusional Optimism. It's awesome. You stay there the whole time. That's when you work really hard, you like believe in your idea. People who don't believe in you, they just don't get it. And no one's like been fired yet. No customers have gotten mad at you. You haven't had any bad tweets. Google hasn't entered your market yet. You haven't realized that you suck at building software yet. Like everything's really good during Delusional Optimism. Part of me says launch as fast as possible so that you remove yourself from Delusional Optimism. But now, several companies in, I can also say it's the most fun part, so enjoy it while it lasts. I love Delusional Optimism. In fact, all of our to-do lists on my current company, we call the to-do list to-do items during Delusional Optimism. That we're all very clear this is not for real, because real people that don't care about us haven't used our product yet. And I'm right about everything, which I love. And once we work with real users, I'm right like 5% of the time. So you go from delusional optimism to your launch. And if you do it well, you get launched in something like TechCrunch or some way you have of like getting publicity. We call that the TechCrunch of initiation. It's when you feel the absolute best in the world and everyone in your like family tells you how proud they are of you, and lots of friends like your status update on Facebook, and it's really, really cool. And then a whole bunch of people who are failed entrepreneurs that have become SEO consultants, they leave comments on TechCrunch like, I could have done this in a weekend, or this will never make it. And you're like, we're going to prove them wrong. And you have like 90,000 hits that day. And then 3 days later, at least for FlightCaster, we had like 42 visitors. That is wearing off of novelty. OpenVote, I vividly remember after launch, we had like 36 visitors. So like my whole goal when we launch our next company is that on like 3 days afterwards, we have triple-digit visitors to our site. That would be sweet. So after wearing off of novelty, you enter the trough of sorrow. And for FlightCaster, it meant that our user interaction and downloads weren't growing. And it really sucks. It's like all of those ideas, and by the way, all that business plan writing you did is all completely worthless now because something's wrong and you don't know what it is. You have to time your fundraising really well so that you fundraise before the trough of sorrow hits. And so we raised our venture round during our TechCrunch of initiation. And we closed it right before the wearing off of novelty, and then we hit the trough of sorrow. And really good VCs know exactly what's going on, and they're there to like work with you. And really bad investors get mad at you and like are shocked. But we were pretty honest with everything throughout the process. So the fact that we were struggling at this point when you work with great VCs is okay, because they never really believed your bullshit anyway. They just like the fact that you're really ambitious and working hard and you have a great team. And we did have a phenomenal team. So for like 9 months, we tried all sorts of different ways to change the way FlightCaster worked to make it better. And we came out like 9 months later, and there's this thing, all startups do it, it's the release of new improvements. And it's version 2.0, and it's going to solve everything. And it's followed like immediately afterwards by the crash of ineptitude. That is when you really fail. And FlightCaster happened in, what's this year, 2011? In 2010, May 15th is when we had our crash of ineptitude. We had set benchmarks on our business development process, our accuracy of our algorithm, and our engineering stability. And we failed. And it really sucked. We were a team of 8. We'd spent about 60% of our money. And we didn't hit our benchmarks. And I believe we weren't going to hit our benchmarks. And it was that time I like internalized for the first time a really important lesson from OpenVote. In OpenVote, we iterated like 12 times and tried to make it better. And then when we failed, I believe that we'd like really given it our all. But there were like a whole bunch of companies that like made a whole lot of money doing similar things to us, like right afterwards, which really sucked. We had been optimizing the whole time, and optimizing is not iterating. When you're optimizing things, you're being uncreative. So doing little things that make things slightly better when your core hypothesis is wrong anyway doesn't work. And so with FlightCaster, we had like a really cool product. We had a lot of great downloads, but we weren't growing in a way that was going to make a venture-backed return happen. And I was unwilling to do what I did with OpenVote, which is like slowly head towards the dead pool. So I took my co-founders and I said, if this is the deadline we had set for ourselves, we have 40% of our money left. Let's do something incredible, but it's not going to be this. So we got FlightCaster up and running. We kept it going. And we created, you'll see like right at the top of our website, I think it's still there. Maybe I'll take it down now. It says FlightCaster Analytics. We created just a whole brand new like shell of the company. Like we didn't reincorporate, but we said flight delay prediction is one thing we can do. And then we agreed that we would fake do Y Combinator again. That is, we'd come up with a new idea, we'd spend 10 weeks working our ass off building it, and then we'd launch it. And instead of spending those 10 weeks trying like lots of little tweaks on our existing product, we would just come up with an all-new thing. So the next week, I had everyone come in with new ideas for each morning and afternoon session, and we agreed that we would come up with 10 new ideas in 1 week. And we'd spend 3 hours on each of them. And then after that, we'd go like research it as best we could for a couple weeks, and then we'd go do one of them. So we did. We like came up with an idea to do like revenue optimization for airlines, revenue optimization for flyers, the travel coupons. We did a whole bunch of like things with APIs and data in the travel space. And then I went and I flew around to like 14 different cities and met with all these different people in the travel industry. And sometimes I didn't even have anything to say. I just said, like, we're really, really, really smart, and we want to help you in some way that you'll pay us money for. What would you like that to be? Some people were insulted by that. Other people liked our hustle and our gusto. But in the process, I don't know, have you guys heard of these things called daily deals? The little company called Groupon now. They have interesting ways of doing accounting. So this was before lots of people were talking about daily deals, but we kept hearing about coupons. And that's all anyone wanted to talk about was coupons, and we didn't understand why. So I don't know, we just decided we'd create a travel coupon site. And turns out becoming like Groupon for travel was a really popular thing, and we got pretty far in building it, and we had this company come along saying, this is the thing that we're going to build. We like you guys. Come and meet us. So I went to come meet them to do a deal with them, and they said, we're not going to do any deal. We'd like to buy you, or else we're going to go compete with you. We looked at the company. It looked like a great deal. It had been 2 years, and it looked like a good option, and we talked to our investors, and our investors liked it, and so we sold. And it was a phenomenal moment. Funny thing about selling your company, once you sell your company, it's not yours anymore, and I never did this just for the money. I like building things, so I've now left, and I'm starting a new company in commercial real estate now. So just to follow that little path, we did construction, politics, travel, commercial real estate. But it's called 42 Floors, and we're going to change the way people search for office space. I'm pretty freaking stoked about it. We're in the delusional optimism stage right now. And I want to stay there a little bit longer, but we're going to launch in a few weeks. And I'm pretty excited because then we will get to the real time and I'll be in the trough of sorrow. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. What happens after the crash of ineptitude? It was the wiggles of false hope. And if you're lucky, one of those wiggles becomes the liquidity horizon. And we got there with FlightCaster, which is a sweet thing. But my goal for 42 Floors is different. I've now done this for like 10 years. I want a company that I'm going to run for a really long time because running companies is pretty fun. So 42 Floors, I don't want to reach a liquidity horizon too early. I want to build a company that becomes really big, not because I need lots of money in my life. I actually don't. But I want to build something where I really get to make an impact that lasts for a long time. And it's a nice feeling. And it's inspiring to the team and to our investors that we talk to. I suspect we'll like screw it up a whole lot because I've screwed up everything else that we've ever done. But I think we got a good chance, and we're going to go after it. So, Howie, I think I hit my 45 minutes. So I'd be happy to answer some questions from you guys. So we always thought that apps were a lottery game where a few companies make a lot of money by like doing something that went super viral, and we never thought that would happen with us. Like it could, but we didn't plan on it. We had a thesis that if our data was really, really good, it would be integrated into travel management companies so that like VIP flyers could pay $50 a month and never, ever be on a delayed flight. And that American Express Travel or Carlson Wagonlit would change their flight ahead of time preemptively if there was a large chance of a delay. What we discovered when we tried to sell that is travel management companies don't care that much about whether their customers are delayed. What they care about is what they get paid for. And so we weren't addressing something that was like the very top of importance for them. What was the top of importance for them was helping their companies save money. And that's where we got the travel coupons. The other thing we learned, we did get far enough along that our original business idea was viable. We learned that integrating with travel companies really sucks. Like they don't have RESTful APIs. They don't have data structures that are usable. We were like talking with this company about integrating with them, and their way of delivering to us travel itineraries, like their own travelers' itineraries, was to CC us on that traveler's email because they had no other way to do data integration. And we were going to like build this like parsing that parsed it and like figure out a way to keep it synchronized. It's horrible. And to do that, they sent me a 115 question security briefing on like all the things we would have to do at our company in order to be security compliant. I don't know. That sounded miserable. Like horrible. Like I like building things on the web, and if we have a security breach, then like we fix it real quickly. Not selling into the enterprise is an entire ball game, and it wasn't one we wanted to play. And so what it came down to when we sold was we have this cool tech company that'll buy us and give us a win and some money, and we can build it with them, and they like already do all that stuff. Or we have to learn to become like security compliant in every way and integrate with really slow-moving big companies, and that wasn't for us. All right, so the by far the most common question I ever get when I talk to MBAs, how do you find a technical co-founder, was the question. I'll direct you to a blog post I wrote called Please, Please, Please Don't Ever Ask Me How to Find a Technical Co-Founder. It's one of my best, most well-read blog posts ever. And in it, I give like tons and tons of advice, but I have one like overarching piece of advice. And that is, you don't find a technical co-founder, you earn one. And once that clicks for you, what the odds of serendipity happening will be much, much higher. So finding a technical co-founder is like a searching game where you like search a whole bunch of different places, you talk to lots of people, you're like always selling your idea. And every time you interact with someone who could be your technical co-founder or could introduce you to your future technical co-founder, they have three options. They can go ahead and recommend you warmly, they can join you themselves, or they can tell you if they find someone, they'll tell you about it and basically ignore you. And what I find is that people who search for technical co-founders are actually really close to them all the time. They're like one friendship away, but that friend or connection is unwilling to make an introduction on their behalf because they haven't earned it yet. So what do you do to earn a technical co-founder? The most important thing, and everyone should do it right after they finish reading Getting Real, is you should learn how to code. It's not because you're going to be the coder. It's because coders don't like working with people who don't code. And running a tech startup is about running a technology. So the percentage of business people who learn how to code is like 1%. So if you want to be at the top 1% of the people that this technical person is thinking about working for, then just be the person who knows how to code. And I think it takes a month. In that blog post, I give lots of links to how to learn. But my favorite one right now is called Learn Code the Hard Way. And it's the easiest way to learn how to code. It's written by Zed Shaw. You can do it in Python or Ruby, which are the only two languages that you should really focus on right now. And if you work really, really hard on it for a month, like the same level of focus that, based on my MBA experience, people probably put into drinking right now. Like if you take 1 month off from partying and just like study this thing really hard, then the odds of you finding a technical co-founder like go through the roof. And the goal is build something, anything. So I've got this site I'm building right now. It's called don'tdatethisdude.com, and it's where girls can post the names of guys that have been really mean to them and post horrible screenshots of horrible text messages. Only reason I'm doing it is because in the process of learning how to code, our coders really like talking to me about it. And I make much smarter decisions, but they also respect the fact that I'm trying to learn what they do, and I don't talk to them like an idiot. So I've given this advice like many, many, many times. Everyone who's taken the time to learn how to code, almost everyone has never regretted it and has been successful at finding someone. And everyone who's done this like route of just spending like months and months looking for someone eventually has this story where they say, you know, I really gave it my all, but I couldn't turn down this offer from McKinsey, and so I think I'm just going to do it on the side from now on, and then nothing ever happens. So, learn how to code. It's not the hardest thing in the world. The other thing you can do, if you read Steve Blank's book or any of his blog posts, he talks about customer development. Is without learning to code, you can build most of your site using software. So you can get your site designed on a site called 99 Designs for like $500. You can send it off to a company called PSD to HTML, and it'll be converted into CSS sheets. You can use WordPress or Weebly and take your CSS and post it up on the web. You can use Google Docs in order to like have data going back and forth. And there, without ever knowing how to code, you have probably a pretty functioning website. So we did this for some of our like experiments when FlightCaster was struggling, because we didn't want to just build the whole thing every time. And what we would do is we would build like a whole fully functioning looking site. And when people would try to use it, we'd like send them into the sign up form, and then we would apologize that our beta is oversubscribed, and we would call them up and tell them like how busy we were working with so many customers already, but tell us more about your needs and we'll figure out when we can get you into the beta. We never built anything. It was just a page. We built it in like 48 hours. So if you don't have a company yet, how cool is it to meet with a tech co-founder, potential tech co-founder, and say, here's what I'm building. Tons of people already want to use it. I've already figured out a lot of the problems with it. Will you help me build it? Versus the dude who says, let me show you my napkin. I'm really, really excited about the potential, even though I've never done something like this before. So earn a technical co-founder, and you will you'll get one that really has loyalty to you. So the question was, how do you compensate for having any experience in entrepreneurialism? Okay. This is really, really good because pedigree doesn't matter at all in startups. All that matters is you make something people want. So an MBA, for the most part, is a strike against you, and you should know that going in. You're probably learning really valuable skills that will be helpful the rest of your life, and like you're having really good interactions like this. But from a perception standpoint in Silicon Valley, the MBA is a definitive negative, and you have to work against that. The best way to work against it is to build something that people want, anything. And that shows that you have what it takes. And then the MBA is something that's going to hopefully like really serve you, but probably not during the pre-product market fit phase of the company. So what's something you could build? You could do that idea of like faking the front end of your site and build something people want. And if you build like a gorgeous front end that people want, then no one will care that you've never done this before. You're obviously good at it. You can also build a blog. Like getting a good following of readers on your blog is a way to communicate to investors and to partners and to technical co-founders that you're someone who knows how to like access a market. Having a Twitter following over like a couple thousand people is proof that people want to listen to what you say. And if you're trying to convince people that you're going to market a product that people want, it's helpful if you've done something in the past where you've done something that people want that's objective. So I think the blog is like a really accessible one, because learning how to do it and do it well is hard, and it's really fun, and it keeps you engaged in the community. And I don't think you have to like have anything super innovative to say. It's not like grad school where you're trying to like push forward the expansive knowledge. Having interesting stories that help people do their day a little bit better is what wins readers on blogs. So my blog, Humbled MBA, I like talk about like how to deal with insomnia. I rant on MBAs. I tell people stories from FlightCaster. Like each one is like a tiny, tiny snippet of advice. But the whole thing is oriented around anyone who reads a particular post should be able to do their job better. And I throw in as many useful links into every post that I can so that it's useful. You can do that right now, and if you have a blog that's well read, no one will care that you've never done this before. They just assume you will have. It'll be fine. Oh, and one other thing, you're probably going to fail your first company. So you should have a mindset that you're going to outlast that, because almost everyone does. And if you fail your first company, then give up and go get a consulting job, which there's nothing wrong with, it kind of wasn't worth the time because you were planning on failing it anyway. So you really need to last through 2 companies in order to like get the right expected value. Oh, so how you fund companies, especially when you're failing. So remembering, I received $31,000 a year for 4 years before business school. Then I went to business school where all my friends had expensive tastes. Then I didn't get a job, and I ran a company that failed, and I spent my own money on it. And then I started another company. I have had less money than like anyone else in the Fuqua program this year, and I've never really struggled, but I spend less money. So it's really easy. Like, spend less money, and it's not a big deal. But I find that people our age have a really, really hard time with that. Like, I didn't feel good not having a car and going out on dates and like not being able to go to expensive restaurants. But for me, I made a decision that couldn't be something that prevented me from having my career dream. And so I went all of my 20s without much money. For the capital that I did need, I maxed out credit cards. I took risks. And the difference between founders and early stage employees is founders take risks and early stage employees don't. And so, I maxed out 14 credit cards and I lost all of it. And then I had to do like really crappy consulting, like by the hour work for doing menial tasks for like 6 months to make up for it. But I learned in that process that it was worth it, and I kept going. And then once you raise money, you get yourself a salary. But even a salary from venture capitalists right now is still low. Like, if you received a salary of $70,000, $80,000 a year, that would be like really good for a web startup. And that's with you still have business school loans that you have to take care of. So I'm not saying it's easy, but that's why the riches are really, really good, because it weeds out most people who can't handle that level of risk. Yeah, so that's a great question. Whatever you think it is people want is wrong, and that's okay. And that's why business plan writing doesn't matter anymore. It used to. Like 10 years ago, business plan writing was saying, I know what people want. Here's how much it costs to build. Here's how much money I'm going to make for it. And here's everything we need to do to accomplish it, right? And then, like, here's the size of the market that we'll capture if we are successful. But that was in a time when building software was really, really hard. Now, it only takes like a month to build the first version of something, or a couple months to build the first version of something. And when you're wrong, you get to change it like a month later if you're really agile. So you don't have to be right about it. You simply have to have the capability to build things. And I see them all as systems of experiments. What you really need is a pain point that you really understand. If you really understand why something sucks, then you can make it less suck over time. And with everything I've done, I've always been wrong in like the idea I had for making it suck less, but we just kept changing enough and not like iterating, not optimizing, until eventually people started saying what we were doing is smarter. So for instance, 42 Floors, which like we're about to launch, is this it's like Lending Tree for brokers, where brokers compete for clients' business, because we were really frustrated that when we've searched for office space, our brokers' incentives weren't aligned with us. So we wanted to increase the leverage in the system. But that wasn't the first idea we did. First, we were going to do this like marketplace for subleased desks, because we thought, wouldn't it just be cool if you could sublease desks from other companies? And then we were going to do this like broker directory and do like a lead generation mechanics thing. And then we were going to do this like Zagat score startup where we like score brokers. And now we're doing this fourth idea. I don't know, this one's probably wrong too because we're still in delusional optimism. But I give us like a month to do an experiment. And if we can't disprove our hypothesis in a month, then we're going too slow. And if you're like, if you have this dream of a company and you really believe in it, you're really doing yourself a disservice because you're letting your emotions block your ability to assess markets rationally. And in OpenVote, I believed in the idea because it was mine. But in FlightCaster, it was my friend's idea. It wasn't mine. So I could care less. Like I wasn't super passionate about the idea. I was very passionate about the problem and very passionate about our team and our believing in ourselves. But the idea was just an idea. And most of the companies that go through Y Combinator will have an experience where Paul Graham tells them to stop whatever they're doing and do something else. And like a large number of them take that advice and are very successful. And there's some phenomenal examples of it. Like there's this company called Grepling that's doing search on like your social media sites. So you can look up your like Gmail, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter accounts all at once. And it's run by a 19-year-old who he's raised like $4 or $5 million and has an all-star team, all-star investors. 4 days before demo day, he had a conversation with Paul Graham and they decided to stop his entire startup. And they like brainstormed a new idea and then came up, and then for 4 days he worked like 20 hours a day and built a crappy looking minimum viable product, and investors loved it. That level of agility is really, really hard to fathom, but it's what it takes. Because if there was like a really easy idea that you could predict would work, then someone would have already built it. Yeah, learn. The question is advice for applying to Y Combinator. Paul Graham was a hacker, or is a hacker, and all the other partners of Y Combinator are hackers. And his investment thesis is if we invest in people that were like us when we were their age, then there's a decent chance that they will be as successful as we were. And so what he's looking for is hackers. So if you don't know how to code, you either need to have partners that code or you need to learn how to code quickly. I tell teams that are a combination of business people and technical people that are applying to Y Combinator that the business person shouldn't be allowed to touch the app at all and let the technical people fill it out completely. Your odds of getting in are much, much higher if you do that. He's mostly evaluating teams. He even uses your idea as simply a method of evaluating how you think about ideas. He doesn't actually care about your idea that much at all. And he doesn't care about pedigree at all. So it doesn't matter what school you go to. An MBA is negative, but it's overcomable if you have a technical team. You're also on Hacker News, which is really good. Do you have over 100 points in karma? Yeah, so you get karma for like commenting on other comments or posting interesting things. Or if you have your blog, you can post your blog post to it and people can vote on it. And what karma is a really simple way to kind of keep track of who's respected in the entrepreneurial community. And people that are really respected get more points. And it's not like a direct correlation where like people look up how many points you have. But when I get a person who wants to work for us doing business development, I just go look up their Hacker News name. If they don't have one, I don't even interview them. And if they do have one, I look to see the things that they've said and how many points they have, because that's how well the industry respects them. And we market to other entrepreneurs. So if you can't say things that other entrepreneurs respect, then why would you be good at marketing our product? So I think it's really good that you started getting into Y Combinator, news.ycombinator.com. But like jump in, like fully. Like get involved in that conversation. It's the single best community. It's the community that most correlates with successful startups. So do as they do, and you'll have a higher likelihood of success. I will also say that some of the other incubators are not as hacker focused. Techstars, for example, is a phenomenal program. I think Brad Feld is one of like the smartest venture capitalists out there. And they are much more focused on balanced teams. And so it could be a better fit if you're not as technical as Y Combinator prefers. The other plethora of incubators, they're not as helpful as Y Combinator. You don't get this like hype fest. But they allow you to build a company, and they give you the first, whatever, $20,000 to do it. So for FlightCaster, we applied to all of them, like 9 different incubators. And we got into a few of them, and then we got into YC, and we canceled everything else out. That's like a really good way to spend some time, is spend like 2 weeks applying to every single one of them, and go do that as your summer internship instead of something else. One of the nice things about it is it looks impressive, and so you can decide to not do something else and do your startup because you're now in this like program where you're going to learn a whole lot. If this was a year ago, so the question was being in Silicon Valley versus New York City. If this was a year ago, I would have said New York is where B player startups are. I don't think that's true anymore. It used to be that like really, really good startups were all in Silicon Valley, and like there's a very, very small percentage of them in New York. New York's on a huge upswing right now. So if I was choosing between the two, I would absolutely choose Silicon Valley. But if you choose New York for some like personal random reason, or you're like interested in a startup involving media or fashion or something, New York's fine. You just have to take extra efforts to be where the A players are. And right now they're all at General Assembly, which is this shared office space. Or I think the other one's called like New City or something. I would just make sure that the community you're around are doing successful things based on like users and revenue and really good investors. And if you're around all your friends that are like coming back from their day on Wall Street, then you're going to be getting all these incorrect signals that won't lead you in the right direction. If you are in Silicon Valley, your Duke friends will go out of their way to help you, and there are very, very few of you that ask. It's sad. So if you came out to Silicon Valley and called up like, I don't know, all of like the 6 speakers that are doing this program over the next 6 weeks, we'd all go like way out of our way to help you, but only if you're here. If any of you contact me and like want an intro or anything, any bit of help by email, I'm definitely going to do it. But if you said I'll be in Silicon Valley soon and I would love some help, I'm going to like go nuts trying to help you and help you be successful. And that's the reality. And here, there's just everyone wants to talk about startups. So when you sit at a coffee shop, like most everyone there also is doing a startup, or they're not doing a startup, but they work at Google or Facebook. I'd say self-doubt is definitely the biggest thing. I've had a lot of it. When FlightCaster ran into troubles, we couldn't afford to pay 5 out of our 8 people, including guys that I've worked with for years. I really felt like it was my fault. And true, that was like 100% true. When you're like at your job and you screw up, you go home and like the company doesn't fail. And when people ask you what you do, you say like, I do marketing for General Mills, or I'm a consultant for Bain, or whatever. And it's not who you are, it's like what you do. For startups, your startup is who you are. When people say, what do you do? And you say, I run a startup, they say, tell me about your startup. And then you have to explain your whole startup. And if your startup's failing, like that person who you just met at a random bar, like they're going to know kind of like a whole lot about you based on what you tell them right then. And that's really hard when the majority of time spent during the startup is in the trough of sorrow. And so for FlightCaster, we had like 2 options during all that time. I could tell people what FlightCaster was supposed to be and like build it up to be more than it was, which then I would feel like a sham. Or I could tell them I do this startup and it's failing and I'm a failure. And both those are not great options. So, I had to dig pretty deep, and I don't have like a store of courage that I can access really well. I'm sure of that. I know, like I fear failure a lot, and it's paralyzing. That thing from student lofts where like my arms were hurting from stress. Like I don't like score the winning basket at the end of a basketball game. I fear failure too much. But what I do is fail a whole lot, and so I've gotten used to it. And every time I failed, it has been absolutely miserable, horrible, and the feeling hasn't lasted that long. I think it lasts about 3 days. And what I do is I sit and sulk by myself and feel horrible and regret every decision I've ever made, and then 3 days later, I have to make a decision on whether I want to go get a normal job or whether I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And the single greatest competitive advantage I have against most other people is I don't want to do anything else. And so twice in the last 10 years I've gotten normal jobs, and they've lasted like 3 weeks, and I don't deal well with people telling me what to do just because they're paying me. I think that's absurd. How dare they? And I have to be in charge. And I don't know, I guess I didn't learn something in kindergarten, but it allows me to say, if I fail, I fail, and I'll just have to keep going. But the self-doubt's real, and co-founders are really helpful, and communities are really helpful. Because in Y Combinator, when we went to Paul Graham to tell him our original thesis didn't work out, he was like, "How much money do you have?" And we were like, "Well, we still have 40% of it." He goes, "Oh, this is awesome. Let's start over. What would you like to do?" And I got to tell you, that was one of the best moments in the world. He just I was like, "We don't even know. We don't know at all." And then he said, this is a great way to frame the question. He said, he's got this awesome voice, by the way. He goes, "I actually have another company coming into Y Combinator that wants to do travel. What would you recommend they do?" And then I was like, "Oh, so you're trying to get me to think about it from giving advice to other people." He goes, "No, shut up. Just answer my question." And then we came up with this idea of doing 10 new ideas in 10 days. But startups don't die because they run out of money. That is a total misnomer. It's 100% inaccurate. Startups die because founders quit. And when you give up on yourself, you give up on the startup. And that's why you didn't cut your employee count 6 months earlier, or you didn't go through a period with no money and just bootstrap it and make do. Your startup dies when you give up on yourself. And most of the super successful companies have had periods where they ran out of money or just about ran out of money. Steve Jobs being one of the best examples in the world. And you have to figure out a way that you're going to combat that self-doubt. I have not figured it out yet. I've gotten mostly lucky, and I've outlasted those periods. But learning that I don't want to do anything else was probably one of the best things, because I'm just going to keep going. The other thing that's really helpful is most of what was going on with me, I didn't have to think about anyone else. And I call them drag coefficients. When you get married and you have kids and you have student loans and you're of a certain age, your ability to take risks decreases. And that is what causes most people over time to stop doing startups, because they have people that are depending on them. So that's a reality. It means right now, do your startup as fast as possible before those drag coefficients increase. If you want to go get another job and learn 2 years at General Mills about marketing, and then you're going to go do your marketing startup, it just doesn't happen. There are so few examples of people actually doing startups after that. Do your startup immediately, starting tomorrow, and that way you get it in, and you burn your first one and you start your second one before you're worried about how much cash is in your kid's college fund. Um, so the single best way to get great investors excited about your product is to show them graphs that are up and to the right. And until you have something that produces graphs that are up and to the right, you shouldn't waste too much time talking to investors. They're not going to like you or be helpful to you. And worse, you're going to spend time thinking about things that are really irrelevant to making something people want. Like, for instance, when you pitch an investor, you have to pitch $1 billion market with something that can be $50 to $100 million in revenue by year 5, because everyone's looking for the grand slam. But that has nothing to do with how you get your first 1,000 users. So if you spend time talking to investors about that stuff, you will not spend time building your product. So the biggest thing Paul Graham tells us during Y Combinator is not to get coffee with anyone for any reason. That has proved to be a very, very good advice. Build your product, make something people want, produces graphs that go up and to the right, and then investors love discovering people that are not looking for them, and it's super easy to find them once you have graphs that are up and to the right. The problem with like having coffee with investors early to like chat about your idea is that they get this little point in time where they see where you were, and then later they'll see where you've made it to, and odds are you did not get there fast enough. And so even if you are doing better, you've created this trajectory of the slope that's too low, and you've proven that you're a slow entrepreneur. So that is not the perspective you want to have with them. You really want this perspective of, like, every time they talk to you, the numbers are even farther up and to the right, and you're saying things like, we have 10% growth per day, and then, please take my money. I feel like in business school, I spent a ton of time learning about investors, and I found that almost all of it was wrong, because it was all focused on like how you build investor pitches, and there were like things like Guy Kawasaki's 10 slides on like the need, the product, the market, the opportunity, the competitive advantage, yada yada yada. Like, yeah, you'll probably do that deck at some point, but I would recommend you do it like 3 days before you meet with investors. And because most of what's going to matter to them are traction slides and the demo. So like now when I pitch investors, one, I don't tell them that there's a deck. I say, jump on Skype and I will give you a demo of our product. And then I show them revenue numbers or user numbers, and that's it. And that right there is when they decide whether they're going to probably invest in you or not. And then all that other slide stuff is what you do to like help validate their thesis. There are like some investors who are really good at helping people at seed stage, and you should find those people. And the term now going around is super angels or micro VCs. These are people who are willing to talk to you when you have your proverbial napkin. They're really good. I think Paul Graham is one of the best in the world. I think Brad Feld is one of the best in the world. They really don't like meeting with you unless you're in person, and they typically create like programs. So like Dave McClure just started this thing, 500 Startups, which you can get into with like a proverbial napkin and a good team. And you know, that's like a really great way to get access to their advice. When you do have investors that are actually interested and you're ready to take money, the single best thing you can do is create a market. And so I tell VCs that want to meet with us that we're heads down on our product and not available to get coffee. Because day we start fundraising will be like this one day where I will say, we're starting fundraising next month. We're going to start on April 1st. I would like to schedule meetings that I can meet you during the beginning of our fundraising process. And then that week, we'll meet with like 30 investors that week and 30 investors the next week. And we'll do like 5 or 6 meetings a day so that if we can tease out 5 or 6 term sheets out of that, we'll have a market for our shares. And then we can get, 1, the highest price, and 2, we can really like get to know the investors by looking at them in relation to each other. Anytime I hear an entrepreneur that's got like A, B, C that's interested in meeting with them, you should probably turn it down. Like, there's really not a good reason. VCs don't like to close unless they have to. So if you aren't creating competition for your shares, then they're not going to close anyway. Finally, there's like one piece to it. Your VC is like someone you date like 3 times and then decide to marry, and you sign a prenup where they get everything if things go badly. So you have to like treat them really respectfully during the process, and also really skeptically. Most VCs will follow their fiduciary duty to the end, which is making money for their LPs. So all the like buddy mentoring you stuff, it's all good, like it matters a little bit, but you're looking for the VC that's going to do their job well, which is make a lot of money for their LPs, and if they can provide some advice along the way, it's really good. But in the end, when push comes to shove, they'll follow their fiduciary duty. So find people you enjoy spending time with, that you'll like have fun with, and that fit your overall thesis of your company and your vision, and so that when you get into trouble, they're going to back you up. When we got into trouble with FlightCaster, I put up a slide deck at our board meeting. I showed them exactly what's going on. We had one VC who said, so I showed them like 3 different options of what we were going to do moving forward. We had one VC that said, maybe we should just call it a day and you should give us that money back. And we had another VC that said, this happens all the time, what's next? And I mean, that second VC, I'll take his money the rest of my life in any company I ever do. He got my back during a bad time. And the first one, you know, he didn't grow up building companies. He grew up in corporate development at some big company, so he didn't like get what it means to be an entrepreneur. And now I understand what the implication of that is. Still a really great guy, he just didn't get it. So if you can earn the trust of really great VCs who will be on your side, it's a really cool thing. As far as meeting them, intros, it's really, really easy. If you're out here or in New York and you're building something cool. So I would say to any of you out there, if you come to Silicon Valley and you want to meet a whole bunch of people and you have something that I think those people would want to see, it'll take you like 6 months to build a phenomenal network of all the important people you want to meet with. They're super easy to get in contact with warm intros. So just go back to building your product, and then when you're ready, all the investors will be there.